Welcome back everyone, I am Follygon, and in this video I'm going to be sculpting a female character in ZBrush from a photo. Now I love going in depth on my process here in these videos, but I can't always go super in depth on every single little thing. And that is why I've created some tutorials online that you can follow along with to create something much like this character bust that we're going to be sculpting in this video. You can find those at gumroad.com/Follygon. There's a link down below. Now, what I normally do in these kinds of videos is I take a stylized 2D concept work and translate that to 3D as best as I possibly can, trying to keep it as accurate as possible, focusing on the silhouette, all that good stuff. But this time, I'm going to be actually working from a photo of someone, courtesy of roganwolf.com, and then taking that and translating it here in ZBrush as best as I can into a little bit of my own style as well. In my last video, I worked on a stylized character and translated that to a realistic kind of troll character as well, and I'd like to try to find a little bit of a middle ground with this one. And you may be asking, how are we going to do that? Where are we going to start? Well, if you've ever been here before, then you probably already know what I'm going to say, with our good friend, the sphere. I love creating characters from scratch. It's always so much fun to create something from nothing. And it's also great practice. With this character in particular, I really wanted to experiment with style. I created something stylized and realistic in my last video, and I wanted to try to find a nice in-between here with this one, making it look like the photo, but also feel like it had some of my own style in there as well. I start by blocking out the major shapes of the head and upper body, but more so trying to get some information on my canvas as quick as I can. I keep everything really simple in the beginning with primitives before working on any secondary shapes at all, but once most of that is complete, I work my way up to the face, starting to block in where the facial features will be. Up to this point, I have used almost exclusively the Move brush, which is the most simple brush in ZBrush. It just pushes stuff around, but this is where I introduce things like the pinch brush and clay brushes to start building volumes, carving into my mesh, and plane out, my plane changes. So from here I create some really rough eyes and we enter what I like to call the alien phase. This is when I see a lot of people get discouraged that their work is not looking like their concept, when in reality you're so barely into your sculpt that should be something that's very far from your mind. You're currently laying the foundation or groundwork of your character, and it doesn't really matter what it looks like right now, but only where it's going. And you have to be able to see your character within that ugly, garbled mess of an alien that you have right now. Once I've done a little more work on the face with some sharp plane changes to make sure my form is turning in the appropriate area, I move on to softening my face with the smooth brush as well as some trim brushes. I do this a lot more than I would for a masculine face, as those tend to be a bit more hard and chiseled, where female faces tend to be more soft and have gentler forms, which is one of the main reasons why they're just so difficult to sculpt. It's really hard to figure out where these planes change direction when everything is such a gentle and soft curve. So I recommend starting with something more distinct and then softening from there. I do a little more work to the body and then it's off to painting the face. I like to do a simple block out of colors that typically looks pretty scary initially, but it's super helpful in figuring out your proportions. I also add in some of the major shapes of the makeup, like the contouring of the cheek and the hard wings around the eyes, and that really helps me to correct the eyes later on. And then it's off to painting the actual eyes. I spent a little too long on these just trying to figure out direction and how simple I wanted to make them. I'm pretty happy with the end result. Not here exactly because I return to them later on. I actually jump around on all of my facial features as much as I can, not just my eyes. I've found over the years that it's best not to get tunnel vision and spend too much time in any one area. I add in some quick eyelashes with fiber mesh and then go back through and adjust them to better form fit around the eye. They look pretty gross initially, but most of that is due to how fibers are previewed in ZBrush. They don't look all that great until rendering down the line. Maybe you've noticed, but our face is looking a bit old. There's a lot of things right now that are making the face look a lot older than I want, and it takes me a while to start pushing closer to that youthful look of the reference. One of these things that I found, which I adjust later, is the distance between the nose and the upper lip. That and how flat the upper lip are make the face look a lot more droopy and just much older in that area in general. And then other things like the eyes and hair get fixed later as well. This is about the time I like to merge parts together so that I can begin blending between my shapes. The neck in particular needed a lot of help to blend in properly along that jawline. It's tough to figure out a lot of this stuff when it's all separated, Merging it all together starts to help things make more sense anatomically. Not that we're going for something perfectly correct here with our anatomy, but we don't want to look at one area and immediately see something off. Even with a hyper-stylized character, we want the forms to be believable. Next up, I adjust the mouth for a little, adding in some quick teeth, as well as adjusting the shape of the lips, and then I start adding in some accessories, although very simple at this stage. I didn't record this part of the process because it's very boring, but I used some polygroups to Z-remesh the face and get some better edge loops around that area. It's not animation ready by any means, but it is perfect for sculpting. And it's really great for getting some tight transitions on areas like the lips and eyelids. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, topology is simply the flow of our geometry. Essentially how all of our polygons are connected to create the shape that we want. And having the edges of those polygons form loops around areas like the eyes, nose, and lips in a natural, form-fitting way make it much easier to sculpt in those areas. I add in a quick few pieces of jewelry for her ear gauges, which I love. Not something I would ever want for me personally, but I think they look awesome. Then a simple ring for her nose and a stud for the lip. All simple, primitive shapes here so far. One thing I really want to point out with this character is how after I sculpt on one area, I jump back up to the face for a brief moment for a small change here and there. This way I can work on completing the entire figure while giving my eyes some rest from looking at the face. The more time you spend in any one area, the more difficult it becomes to see your mistakes or what you want to change. So as I am doing some cleanup to the body, you may see me jump up to the face and do some quick changes here and there. I highly recommend this if you've never tried this kind of workflow. It's definitely a good habit to build. Alright, it is time to talk hair. I do a lot with this hair, like a lot, and I end up throwing it all away later. I'll explain once I show you what the hair ends up looking like, and it will make perfect sense. But for now, you can just see some of my initial shape blockout and secondary forms. I even start to add in some extra tubes of geometry to represent some of the dangling strands, but I end up redoing all of those too. And I'll talk more about that here in a little bit. Then it's back to painting the eyes for our final pass on those. I wanted to exaggerate the greenish color around the pupil a little more, so I spent some time giving the eye shape some more color depth. And as a fun little painting tip here, you can turn off Z-Add on your smooth brush and just use the RGB setting to blend your paint. That is one technique I use on the eyes here, and I end up using that on the face a little bit later. It's a great way to blend some hard edges in your paint. This is when I start going a little too crazy on the hair, adding in a bunch of strands. My main issue here is that I made so many of them uniform and boring, and there was just way too many of them. I thought I could fix this by making the strands more complex and adding a lot more tiny strands, but it just ended up looking like a giant mess of spaghetti, which is not what we want her hair to look like, if you were wondering. I do a bunch of other little things to the face, jumping back and forth while working on the hair, until I hit a point where I did this first little test render, which I'll show you right now. Yep, so here we have some really nice spaghetti hair, yum! Overall, it doesn't look bad, I guess, but it's not good either. There were also a few things I wanted to do about the shape of the chin, the jawline, and the lips, and a couple other tiny little details that I wanted to fix with the face. So I took a break for a day to work on some other stuff and came back the next day with fresh eyes. After taking a quick break, it was a lot easier for me to fix all the stuff I wanted to change in the face at this point. The hair was still giving me some trouble though, so I took my reference image, put it in Photoshop, and did a quick draw over of some of the major shapes so that I could make something a little more simple with the hair. I completely deleted my noodled mess of hair that I previously had, and went back to sculpting and recreating all of the new, large chunks that I mapped out in Photoshop. Then I broke up those shapes with some secondary forms, sculpting in some additional strokes along the lengths of the hair, and then I added in a few stray strands of hair as well. Not nearly as many as before, which gave a really nice balance between large, medium, and small shapes. I guess something I would like others to take away from this is that it's never really too late to go back and make major changes to a project. I know we kind of went through that in like a minute here in this video, but in all honesty, I mean, I spent hours working on this hair only to throw it away and restart later on. So don't be intimidated by the fact that you will most likely have to do something like this at some point in your artistic career. And honestly, I think she turned out way better because of me going back and making those changes. I think it was definitely worth my time, and I think you would agree. So here is the updated render with the fixed hair and face. Hopefully you guys have found this video helpful or entertaining in some way. If you'd like to learn more about digital sculpting, check out gumroad.com/Follygon. Link down in the description to where all of my brushes, materials, and courses are located, including the Appeal Academy, my course and mentorship program where you can learn the fundamentals of creating appealing form while creating a character from start to finish and receiving personal feedback at every step of the way. If you're new around here, click that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.